Phones on, everyone, please. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending the Economic Development Authority meeting at City Hall here, Council Chambers, Thursday, March 9th at 4 p.m. Administrator Bergman, please call the roll.
Bevins. Beezer.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Kirsch.
Here.
O'Day.
Here.
Yeager.
Yes.
That's it. Thanks.
Very good. First item here is item 3. This is an approval or an amendment to the agenda.
I'd like to move to switch new business up before old business, just to give the consultants a chance to present before we get into the framework discussion.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. We have a motion to basically flip-flop new business and old business in response to our gallery. Do we have a second?
Second.
Yeah, we got a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right. Looks like we got a new and exciting agenda. So we're going to move right into item 5, what would be 5A, which is to define the downtown area for DDBC Main Street application. Mr. Kramvik, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So DDBC is looking to define the boundaries for the application to attain affiliate status with the Main Street program. Staff has included the application in the agenda item along with some mapping options for the EDA to consider. Choosing a boundary does not exclude the businesses from the benefits of the Main Street program, but it's really a way to create data and statistical analysis for metrics later on. So before I turn it over to DDBC, I'd like to note that options A and B are essentially the Main Street zoning district as well as the overlay district from the zoning code. So they would coincide with each other. However, this is separate obviously from the zoning code. They don't have to meet each other, but A and B would essentially be the zoning code options. So while it's helpful for guidance, the boundaries, like I said, don't have to, exactly mimic what our zoning code shows. So with that, I'll turn that over to DDBC with any other questions or comments.
Thank you. Please, welcome.
Okay, so in order, we are applying for our Main Street affiliate status, and a requirement for that Main Street, is this on?
It should be on.
There we are. Is that better? Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we are applying for the Main Street affiliate status. In order to do that, there's a bunch of information that we need to fill out and report to them each year. In order to report that information, we need to have a boundary set up for a reporting area. And so that is our immediate concern in order to move on with the application. There is, on your map, does everybody have it in front of them? This blue area right here is what is currently zoned as Main Street for downtown Brainerd through the city. We are recommending that for reporting purposes, we extend it to that pink or red area, and that includes 8th Street. And the reason we would like to include 8th Street is because it is a main thoroughfare through downtown. There is going to be development to that, and it really fits with the character of downtown and the fact that it has storefronts on that side of 8th Street. So we find that that's important. The type of reporting that we are looking to do are like total number of buildings, number of storefronts, number of vacant storefronts, number of hotels, number of events that are held within that district. And we'll probably end up in the future using it for more reporting statistics than that, such as like number of volunteer hours, jobs created, event attendance, that kind of thing. So it's important that we have that boundary set up, and we're just asking for your input and on that being that you contribute to the DDBC and any concerns or questions.
Very good. Thank you very much. Just hang out up here before we, if we have any questions for you. Does anybody have any questions for staff? All right, very good. Does anyone have any questions for DDBC?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, what difference does it make?
For what?
What we define as downtown?
It's just, for us, it's a reporting. It's a boundary for reporting is what it is.
Yeah.
So it really, that's what it's used for.
Is being included a benefit to any business or being excluded a negative?
Yeah, I mean, really, everything that's on there, we have been including in all of our efforts. I know there's some businesses that have been included in efforts that are outside of that. That's not going to change anything. We're still going to work with those businesses in that area.
So say we exclude, like, one I know for certain that
Yes.
wants to be involved is Yesterday's
Yesterday's
Gone,
Gone,
right?
yeah.
And they're down Laurel Street more
Yeah.
towards that 9th Street end.
Yeah.
If they're not included in what we define downtown, it will not make a
It
difference
will
on how
not
they're
make it-
included or
no,
excluded
We
from
will
any.
still, yeah, I've
right.
actually reached out to them in the last couple of days, so.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Any other questions?
So just to I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, yes.
So just to clarify, for the downtown, this area is what you're reporting to them, even though you might, sorry, for this application, you're just going to be reporting what is defined
We're
or
rep-
agreed upon today, even though you might actually be working with people outside that realm. You're
Yes.
just not going to be reporting that to the Main Street.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we chose to kind of include that, because that's kind of the density of downtown versus the outskirts. And so that makes more sense to us for reporting purposes.
Any other questions? I do have a question here, and I'm sorry, I'm just like bogged down in this a little bit. So I'm hearing kind of two competing things. I'm hearing reporting, and then I'm hearing working with. And that's what's got me, can you just explain what the working with means? Because I think that's really what we're driving at here is are there benefits that some of these outliers or people who aren't getting worked with, what is the difference between working with and not working with? That's my question.
Happy to jump in here
Yeah.
too. I helped put this together. I'm on the DDBC board. So really, like, it just comes down to, in the application, we have to set a defined boundary so that we can report on certain metrics so that we can track progress.
Yeah.
If a business falls outside of that boundary, it's, in the future, we might develop programs where we limit access to, like, say, a grant program or something to just businesses within the downtown boundary, but that's like a discussion we would have at that time. So it's not like it's tied to this boundary per se for future, future grant programs, future activities and things. So we really just see it as a way for us to, we just need to put a boundary around what we're considering downtown so we can report on the number of businesses, the number of vacant businesses, different metrics that Main Street America wants us to report on. If there's a business that falls outside of that boundary, we would still encourage them to be part of downtown events and to volunteer and be part of that. It's just that we wouldn't be counting that business as a downtown boundary in the boundary. I don't know if that clarifies that at all, but we don't want to exclude anybody, but we do need to set some sort of boundary just so that we can track progress and have a way to just measure where we are now and where we are a year from now and into the future for reporting purposes.
And most immediately, we need it for the application to move forward with that. In the future, if we want to change the boundaries, I mean, that is an option that is open to.
Very good. Any other questions? Please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm hearing competing things. So we're talking about in the future, maybe having grant things that will exclude people who are outside of the boundary we define today. But I'm hearing we're including everybody who's outside the
We would
boundary.
have a separate discussion at that time to say, do we want, say we're doing a facade improvement program and we want it to be a downtown boundary, then we can discuss, does that make sense to keep the boundary we have, or since we have peripheral businesses that are on the periphery of downtown, do we want to expand those? Just similar to how when we had deed funding, it's just part of the conversation we have to have at that time to decide who's eligible, who's ineligible. The reason that we didn't want to expand out to 9th Street is that it's kind of more of a mixed use. There's residential in there. There are some businesses. It adds 9 additional storefronts or businesses, but it's a lot of ground for DDBC to have to cover for not adding a lot of just density of businesses.
But to answer my question, we will in the future be excluding people who aren't included in the map we define today.
Not necessarily. We would have to discuss it at a case-to-case basis. I don't know. Mary, go ahead.
Well,
Let me try. I was involved in a couple conversations, but not on this final recommendation. But so Rethos is the organization that organizes the Main Street program here in Minnesota, and their recommendation is to have a very small footprint because it's much more manageable, both from a human resources perspective of reaching out to the businesses and for that metric. They need to show results in order to be eligible for grant funding and programs on both a state and a federal level. And us having access to those things would be part of that as well. One of the main initiatives with Rethos is the preservation and rehabilitation of historic buildings and old buildings. So again, I think influencing the conversation about the boundaries is that density of these older buildings. Once you go a block or two out, we don't have as many of those that we would want to maintain or restore or anything like that. So starting with a smaller footprint helps. And then, quite frankly, DDBC has been really focused on the 4-block core. And so this is already an expansion of what we've been doing for the last 3 to 4, 5 years, is adding some additional footprint of trying to reach out to some additional buildings and adding.
Will one of you say, yes, we will be excluding people?
Yes, we would be excluding businesses. I think this is fair. I'll refer to Jennifer and, or not, sorry, Jennifer, but Brenda and Marie on this. The way I understand it is if we were to apply for federal grant funds, a building that is not included in our current footprint would not be eligible for those funds. However, we can change our boundaries, I think, on an annual basis. Our intention was for this to be the boundary for the next 2-3 years so that we can work on getting some grant funding if that is an opportunity so that we can do facade improvement. But the short answer, Gabe, is yes.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I got my answer. The boundary we set today, we will be excluding businesses outside of the boundary, including businesses that are in the boundary for future grant opportunities.
Potentially 2 to 3 years is my understanding.
Yeah, so I would generally want it to be as big of a boundary and as inclusive as possible, but being that there are 87 or 90-something businesses in the blue and red, I'd be fine with approving their recommendation.
Can I add another
Yes,
point
please.
of clarification? So, and I think the working with versus the excluding is specifically to potential for funding, but the working with part is for the programming. So anything that we would still be doing as DDBC in terms of events, promotions, trying to create continuity in a community in downtown, those businesses would still definitely be included in that programming effort. It would just be if we get lucky enough to stumble into some funding opportunities.
Understood. James, can you give us an idea of kind of what you're looking for an action or motion here? Is this, please?
I think DDBC was looking for a motion to be able to apply for affiliate status. Just wanted to make sure the EDA was okay with the boundaries that were set within the application. So I believe they were looking for a motion.
Understood, thank you. Well, there you have it, guys.
Mr. Chair,
Please,
can I give it a shot even though I came in late?
please do.
To move to accept the, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. O'Day.
It is on.
Test 1, 2. I move to accept the boundaries as presented for the DDBC Main Street application.
Very good. We have a motion to accept by Mr. Bevins, and we have a second by Mr. O'Day. Is there any continuing discussion?
I'm assuming that we're talking about the largest boundary.
I believe my understanding by your motion is blue, red, and green.
Correct?
No, that's not correct.
So, sorry,
Well, Kelly made the motion.
we're recommending option B to include the blue and the red.
Understood. Got it.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay, very good. So we have a motion and a second. I just want to verify that the second was to the blue and the red, to the motion, the original motion, correct?
I seconded the motion.
Very good, very good. So we got a motion and a second on the blue and the red. Do we have any further discussion?
I would prefer the largest boundary, but
Okay, so maybe it wasn't the blue and the red. It was the green, blue, red, and green.
I seconded the motion.
Understood.
I didn't know what the motion was that I seconded, apparently.
Duly noted.
All right, any further discussion? We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
I want to just speak. I think this is a start, the blue and the red. I'd love to see the green, and I'd love to see other, even bigger. So I think when people talk facade, and I could throw any one of those downtown businesses out, I would guess that a lot of people would go, huh? But if you say what they see when they drive down Washington, everybody's got an opinion, and that's not in this. And I think, and I've said this, every single EDA meeting we talk about money, and particularly grant money, you're missing the boat if you leave it downtown. We've had more programs downtown for money, starting with redoing the streets. It was the first project in 100 years of Brainerd that was not a 50-50 split, where the citizens of Brainerd in total paid for more of the street downtown than anywhere else they ever had, up until Buffalo Hills, which bothered me as well, and I believe I voted against it. So I think a lot of people, when they see bang for the buck, they see it somewhere else than here. And I'm sorry, I'm a supporter of downtown. That's made this motion because I think it's a good idea. It's a start. So I really think it, and Gabe Johnson may have put it better than me, it needs to be as big as possible as far as commercial improvements. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, and that, I'll
Please.
just add, like, that's exactly right. Like, this is a start. We have to start somewhere, and we would like to start with this footprint just so we can have a manageable area to do programming in and track progress. And the goal is definitely to continue to expand this.
Very good, thank you. Any other discussion? Got a motion, a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, very well. Motion carries. We'll move on to item 5B, which is to reevaluate the tiers recommended by Swanson Hascamp. Please, Mr. Kramvik.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Swanson Hascamp provided a thorough analysis last year of the downtown parking lots and what may be required for a developer to finance construction. So staff is recommending that the EDA Commission potentially relook and revisit the sites and the tiers and see if there does need to be some changes. So Jennifer's here to discuss that.
Very good, thank you, Mr. Kramvik. At this time, we'll turn it over to you. Jennifer, please.
It's nice to see you all. It's been a while. Happy New Year. It's March, but Happy New Year. It still feels like January. So when we went through our year in review in 2022, we actually talked a little bit about that it might be a good idea to revisit our priority sites and make sure that what we're setting as important for 2023 is actually what we want to be pursuing over the next year. So as we discussed, we wanted to do that in the first quarter, which is, I think, why we're here. I was going to say this evening, but it's not quite night yet. So this afternoon. So a couple things to consider as we go through the discussion today. The first is, if you all recall, in 2022, we really spent a lot of time looking at the underdeveloped or undeveloped parking lots that were in downtown. And that was really one of our priorities in terms of doing fit tests, doing analysis of how many units could fit, what would be the funding gap, et cetera, on those. So we know since then that actually Thrifty White is actually looking like it's going to be a development in terms of a multifamily project, which is the same type of project that would have gone onto those parking lots. So the idea here is, do we let them lead first and let them take that and we learn from what they're doing there and prioritize somewhere else? That is entirely up to you, and part of why I'm here today, to make sure that we are focusing on the right thing over the next year. So part of my thought is, let's let a project that we already know is going to go, let that happen. Let's learn from it, watch it, observe it, and let's maybe look at a few other opportunities that we might be able to tackle in 2023. So that's one thought. Privately owned large contiguous properties and acreages, what we typically in the development world call greenfield sites, that are currently listed actually and are actively marketed out in the world. That presents potentially an opportunity at looking at some kind of public-private partnership and trying to meet our objectives, which, as I understand them to be, bringing more housing product to market and also making sure that we've got housing choices available. So it's something to think about. There were private properties or properties that were owned by private entities that were on our original list, if you recall. So it's just bringing that back to the forefront and saying they're actually now actively marketed. It's not just, hey, that's a big piece of land and that could work. They're actually trying to find a buyer. So now might be an opportunity to also think about how do we reach out with them? Could there be a master planning effort, et cetera? The industrial park areas, if you will, the Wright Street extension, and then also the platted industrial area where you've got several smaller 1.5 to 2 acre parcels, if you will, down by FedEx. Those I know have been on your books for quite some time, and I do think there's a huge opportunity there. And I've got those kind of up front to talk a little bit with you guys about to get your sense of whether or not we should try to actively market those and actually bring them on the market in a more visible way. Interest rates, as everybody knows, continue to rise, although we have seen some stabilization, and we do believe that they will kind of stabilize in the first half of the year in particular. That is impacting, obviously, multifamily development. It's also impacting other construction. Single-family homes, for example, there's a lot of what we call production builders that are kind of putting the pause on, and that is impacting the market. The interest rates are obviously playing a very big part in that pause. And also other greenfield development might be more cost effective to develop. Obviously, that has a relationship with the interest rates, obviously. So whereas if we've got a parking lot that we're trying to demo and put a building on, that's probably more expensive than if we could find a piece of raw land that doesn't have something on it today. So just some considerations as we go through the discussion today. So if you could scroll down just a little bit. The EDA land and property objectives, as I understood them last year, were that we were looking at bringing more housing diversity to the market. We want to bring housing product to the market. We talked a lot, or a little bit, I should say, about the fact that a lot of your multifamily housing opportunities today are actually subsidized units, and we don't have actually a lot of availability in terms of product that's available at market rate. That's important in terms of diversity and how do we bring more market rate opportunities, especially if we're looking at multifamily. So that was part of what I understood of last year. And then also obviously supporting development that continues to bring businesses and create jobs. So those were kind of the two pieces that I understood in terms of what we were after last year. Obviously, I want to make sure that those are still kind of the objectives, especially as we look at what sites to prioritize and potentially do some master planning and concept planning on. So this year, I put together just a draft sort of swing at how we might look at some of those properties. In your packets today, I think, was also what we put together last year, which was a map that had a key on it that showed where the location of all these properties were, and then also a little bit of a snapshot about each property. Again, you'll recall last year we did quite a bit of work in terms of those underutilized parking lot areas. Those have quite a bit of study that have already gone along with them. The question obviously is, do we want to take those to the next step? Or do we want to hit pause a little bit on those and bring some other properties into the mix? If we were to do that, the first thing that I obviously put up here are those industrial properties. There's been a lot of movement in the industrial markets over the last year to 2 years. Part of the issue that I believe might exist here is the fact that it's just not known that they're there. And so part of that is how do we actively get a presence for those properties so that folks know, and I'm not talking about people who are Brainerd local, people outside of this market. How do we get the message out? How do we create marketing around that? How do we get it on the public listing services like MinCar, LoopNet, those types of places? Because at the moment, there's just not a presence. If you did want to locate to this area, you wouldn't necessarily know that they were here. So that's one piece of it. The other piece is obviously, I think, more so on the Wright Street extension pieces as opposed to the TC Drive Industrial Park. The first one, obviously, we've got platted lots. That's very different. There's not much planning left to do, if you will, which we'll look at in just a moment. But the parcels are all platted. They're between 1.5 and 2 acres. This is, in my mind, really a marketing issue. This is people don't know it exists. We also don't really have a vision around it, to the best of my knowledge, in terms of who and what types of users could we go out and reach out to. those are smaller industrial parcels. From my perspective, those feel a little bit almost like a creative industrial type of user that could go down there. How could we do a targeted marketing approach around that to try to get some traction down there? The Wright Street extension, those are not platted parcels for the most part, but they're pretty large contiguous acres. So we've got 11 acres, I think, on the east side of the cul-de-sac, 11 acres on the south side, and then a pocket of 7 acres, I believe, which is in the maps. But the reality is those are large acreages, so how could we maybe start thinking about some master planning of those? And do we have the right uses there? Is that whole area, does it want to be industrial? Or should we maybe look at whether or not there's other uses that could also be available? It's land that you own. It's kind of prime in terms of being able to look at that. So that's the first piece. In terms of greenfield site, I listed a few here that are actually privately marketed right now. They're on the market. They are large contiguous acreage. The opportunity here is less about the fact that you own it and more about should we try to reach out and look at some kind of relationship of some kind. I don't know what that looks like today. It's more a matter of, is that something that's interesting to you? There are definitely nicely positioned, nicely located parcels, but they're large. And for a builder, for example, or a developer to come in and know how to navigate the large contiguous acreage, sometimes what they need is a little bit of a push of how could this be concept planned out in order to really come up with what pockets of types of uses could be on what portions of the property. So that presents an opportunity. It's not a slam dunk because they're privately owned, but it's food for thought because clearly the current owners are looking to sell it. It's on the market. So, excuse me. And then lastly, we had last year the property that the utility was looking at taking over. It's about 30 acres. It's my understanding that the water tower, I think it's a water tower or some kind of public utility, they haven't identified exactly what part of the property they need. It's a little bit more challenging, but that could be a back half of 2023 type of effort if they go through some planning to understand what that is. I also understand, and it's not on this list, but I do understand that there might have been some discussion. James, am I speaking out of turn?
Yeah, yep. So at Jennifer's, I filled her in at the last council meeting that there were 3 parks that were set aside from the resolution dedicating that there was, potential interest in possible development. Obviously, with something like that, it would have to go to the park board as well as city council approval for that. But it was brought up that, specifically you have Trailside Park that has potentially 80 acres of developable property on there. Could there be some type of park as well as development on there? So that's a potential later on. Obviously, a lot of steps to get to that point, but I did fill Jennifer in about that potential.
Good. Thank you, James.
And then obviously, lastly, I did put the City Hall parking lot, the 3 parking lots that we took a look at. So the question is maybe we push those sort of towards the back half of the year or maybe the early part of 2024 once Thrifty White has gotten some traction and we can kind of follow that process. So with that, on the next page, I'm sure is the key map that kind of shows the location of where these properties are. I think this is important just as a reminder. We're not forgetting any of the properties that we identified prior. That's obviously, we want to carry all of that forward and maintain it. It's more a matter of we can't tackle all of these in 1 year. Obviously, this is a big effort. So we want to make sure that we've got an inventory and have identified them. They continue to stay here. If for some reason someone contacts us, something might get elevated back up into the mix. Some of these are definitely private property owners, for example. If they came to us and said, this is something we'd like to explore, they might end up getting prioritized into 2023. So the idea here, though, is to maintain the list, make sure we have it. And then obviously for each of these, we've got the key of how much land area are we really talking about? Who's the owner? What are the sort of opportunities from what is it zoned? What is it guided in your comp plan, et cetera? So with that, I think hopefully that's a good overview. I'm happy to start answering any questions you might have. Maybe you have no questions. I don't know. So,
Please. Yeah.
I have 3, Jennifer.
Okay.
You mentioned our industrial park land, and people not knowing. I kind of get that, but I think we've hired somebody. I know we have. We have somebody, we're paying, I don't know that we're paying them, they're just contracted to sell it for us. It's a realty company. I don't want to put them on the spot because, from what you just said, they're not doing their job. So, we have somebody.
My understanding is that it's not currently listed.
That contract may have expired, but I don't recall it coming back to this body to renew it either.
Yeah. My understanding is that it's not. And so
You
that's
can't
certainly
go
something.
into a town for 60 miles and not see a billboard with which industrial park lots are sold and which ones are still open. We've got 5 major arteries into this town that could use that, if what you're saying is true. So somebody's not doing their job, or it could be us. We could have let that lapse. Or maybe they weren't doing a good enough job. According to you, they were not.
Well, I certainly
I
don't
don't
want
mean to put you on
to.
the spot. This is for future, is what I heard.
I don't want to imply that because it's my
No, you
understanding.
said it directly.
No, it's my
You didn't
understanding.
imply anything.
No. My understanding is it's not currently listed. It's not
Okay.
under contract to be. So I am in no way being disparaging to
right.
any broker who may be listing it on your behalf.
Perfect.
It's my understanding that it's not currently listed.
Could be.
When I'm on MinCar, which is what all of us look at as brokers, I'm a broker, it's not listed. I
Pretty
don't see it.
disappointing. That's a click of a button. Okay.
It's clearly it's a contract. It's certainly something that, especially if you want to attract any user that is from outside the Brainerd area, which I'm not saying you do or you don't, but the broader the audience, the better off we are, right? Nobody knows it exists.
I agree.
So that's my
question
first.
That was question number 1. I just want to clarify.
Number 2, any idea what's happening in the on the Wright Street extension? We had heard in front of this group a presentation from some people who are going to mine cryptocurrency, but they were going to do all kinds of other stuff in that building, which has been abandoned for a long time. Has that developed into anything do you know of? I haven't heard anything. They haven't come before us, but
To my knowledge, no.
Me either.
James
So
can
none of
say
the
that.
rest of that stuff that was gonna happen. I understand that crypto mining doesn't take a lot, doesn't take 30 employees.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We've heard that time and time again, but there was a whole bunch of other stuff that was kind of exciting. Okay?
Yep.
Haven't heard anything about that.
I've heard nothing.
Me either.
Which again, to me suggests that there's an opportunity here because,
That's privately owned, so there's no opportunity for us.
no, the stuff that's not, the
Oh,
stuff
yeah,
that's.
all the other stuff around the
Yeah.
Wright Street extension. That's a whole other story. And the third question is, some of the stuff we haven't talked about, the privately owned stuff. Some of the privately owned parking lots, East Brainerd Mall, the new Thrifty White, Hardee's, they have triple the size of the needed parking lot. And we were, I believe, gonna send out inquiries. Did we? And did we hear anything back? Did anybody say anything? Like, heck no.
Yeah.
Or I love my huge parking lot. I don't need the money. Or I'd be interested.
Yeah.
Have we heard anything on some of those less obvious? Because it's not a greenfield somewhere, it's a parking lot.
Right.
Underused parking lot, but often right on our main drag.
Right.
To me, those are things that people see.
So the first thing I will say is we compiled a whole list of
Yeah.
who all the owners were. We did not send anything out last year. We were prioritized and focused on your downtown fit tests. There's also the challenge of trying to time it properly with the reconstruction of what the right timing is. It's my understanding now that we're closer on, they've gone through how many open houses last year? We were trying to time it with when the reconstruction and the plans become more finalized, so we actually have a good sense of how much area are we dealing with in terms of what leftover is truly leftover and what are truly the opportunities. Because and it's a chicken or the egg, I understand that. There's an element of how do you time this properly so that you know what the access points are, you know what the road points are, so that you know what types of uses would be the best position to capitalize on those plans. So some of it is timing our contact with them properly. And it's my understanding we're closer. Did they punt it to 2025?
Year
Is that right?
26.
26?
26. Yeah, they did, essentially, city council did give municipal consent for the overall design. Right
Okay.
now, they're working on aesthetics, but I think pretty much the design's been worked out with access points and roundabouts and such.
Okay, so now that that's set, the timing of that is more appropriate, because now if there's consent, municipal consent for what those access are, then we can do a better analysis of what parcels on here are actually more suited for some kind of development or redevelopment, and what might that use be. So if that's a priority for this body this year, we can certainly bump that up. I have
I
no
thought
issue
we
with
had
that.
already done it, so that's why I was asking if
Right.
we had, I hadn't heard back if we had any response at all from anybody.
We talked, I think it was middle of last year when I was here talking about the market pieces related to downtown, about timing it, that we were watching that process because we needed to make sure, we want to make sure that when we reach out to them, we have a sense of what that design is going to look like. Because what we have on the corridor, those might not be the right parcels based on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We just
I know
want.
exactly what you're saying.
So when we talked about it, and I probably didn't say it as directly as this, but when we talked about it, it was more a matter of once we have the design, we have a better approach for actually contacting the parcel owners. We don't want to do it multiple times because some of those owners aren't local owners, and it's you get one bite at the apple, so to speak. So we don't want to do it multiple times. We want to make sure we actually have the design. So, and I realize it's not going to happen until 2026, but if we have municipal consent, that should be pretty solid.
Some of these things do move slow, but I was just kind of a general feel.
Yeah.
So you've got this large unused, what appears to be unused parcel. Are you interested in help developing or redeveloping it? Yes,
Right.
no. Thank you. City of Brainerd. Love the city of Brainerd. Thank you.
Is that a box too? Do you love the city of Brainerd?
Any other questions for Jennifer?
Yeah.
Please.
I'm just weighing the options here. I know housing is a priority. Now, just the discussion we had was the 210 corridor. Seems like it's a good timing to reach out, but like, is there any overlap in like main corridor properties that also are ideal for housing development? I mean, so we can kind of kill two birds with one stone, or is it, because I kind of see that 210 is mostly retail or not non-housing development. So if we're trying to prioritize housing, like which of these is kind of the best one to shoot for, I guess?
So of course, that was part of why last year the 210 corridor didn't rise to the same level, because the way it's zoned and guided right now is actually not for housing. So you're correct when it comes to that. It's for business and it's for retail, office, those types of users, generally speaking. When I think about what opportunities might exist, actually on the corridor for housing, I would say no. The zoning doesn't permit it. It's not really something that was part of your comp plan vision, et cetera. The housing areas that we identified potentially on it did include the parking lots in downtown, which is obviously how those kind of rose to the top last year. Which is R, I believe on this map, that's the utility, the acquisition from Brainerd Public Utilities that came through. There's about 30 acres there. There's potential that there might be some housing there. I'm not convinced that your Wright Street Extension area couldn't support some residential, to be honest with you, if Wright Street was going to go through, if that's the intent, is that it connects through, which I realize it goes through a township, so you can't necessarily answer that. But that area, there's quite a bit of contiguous land and area, and I'm not sure it all needs to, which is part of why I thought, do we look at that? I realize that this board is not who defines that. The planning commission and the city council are involved in that, but that doesn't mean we couldn't look at it and say, have you guys thought about this? because there's a lot of land area that's there. And part of what I see from a housing perspective is that we're looking for opportunities for diversity in housing types. So multifamily is one of those pieces of the equation, but so are townhomes, row homes, potentially smaller single-family lots, et cetera. So there's a diverse type of housing product that could, if we could find a large enough contiguous area where you could have different product types. The downtown parking lots, if you will, the challenge is size, obviously, we don't have a lot of units. There are 20 units or so. We know we have a gap in terms of how much it's going to cost to construct them. And number 3, interest rates are up, which is a challenge. So you put all those pieces together, they become very challenging. It's not impossible, but it's challenging, and you're probably going to need to fill the gap somehow. So, of course, my thought was, how do we look at some other opportunities? If housing remains a priority, 210 is probably not where that's going to go, based on what your zoning and your land use is. Trying to think. So the park that was brought up that the council talked about on Tuesday, there's certainly some land area that might be available there if that's an opportunity that could have multiple housing types all on one property. And then again, I go back to the private-public partnerships. I mean, when I looked at it, there's I think about 100 plus acres that are being actively marketed right now. That are just raw acres that don't have a master plan, don't have a concept, don't have anything associated with them. So it's not impossible, but it becomes much more difficult for a developer or a builder. Like if you have a small local builder, for example, to take down 10 lots or even put up, 28 townhomes, like a 40-acre parcel is a big piece of land for them to try to figure out how to do that. So, and I don't know what that looks like. I'm just throwing it out there as they're clearly trying to get rid of it. And so those are obviously, there's a 40 or a 50, that's the Mills property on the south end. They're actively marketed right now. And then there's also some on the northeast side as well. So unfortunately, I can't work on 40 properties all at the same time. And so that's part of why I'm here, to try to, say what's our real priority? Like what do you, if housing is it, how do we find properties that fit that definition that you want us to look at from either a master planning perspective, how we might be able to market it, how we might be able to solicit some of the developers that we've talked to, of which we've talked to several over the last year.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, please, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, does this mean we're not going to be getting the marketing plan for the downtown properties we identified last year?
The marketing plan.
Yeah, your proposal said develop and implement marketing, advertising, and communications plan for identified properties within the city, and we identified 3 properties. We'd like the plan.
That doesn't, no, so when I talk about that, let me give a little bit of clarity, and no, it doesn't mean that. So
we won't be getting that.
no, that's not
Okay.
what I just said. I
So-
said that's not, can I answer?
We are going to be getting it?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I explain it?
Yeah, I thought we'd get it in 2022, but yeah.
I think we did a lot of work in 2022 and produced a lot of documentation and materials for you. You disagree?
No, I don't doubt that you did work.
Okay.
And then also on your 2022 proposal, just to follow up on a question Kelly asked, it says you're going to engage identified private property owners on behalf of the EDA who have property to be redeveloped. But you didn't.
We've engaged with several folks. Whether or not we talked to every single person on this map, that's not what we talked
Okay.
about when I was here. We talked about, it's been exactly 1 year basically, a prioritization because we don't have a budget to talk to everybody on this list.
Thank you.
And so we asked you to prioritize, which you did. And then we worked on what you prioritized.
That's all I have, President.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Another follow-up question.
Please.
Is there like an ideal number of properties you're looking for, or does it really depend on like if we're picking housing, like does that kind of give you an idea of like how many you could focus on versus if we're focusing on like retail development in the main corridor, for example?
So as with last year, where we identified 3 to 5 properties, that is the same this year. We looked at the 3 parking lots last year because we said we had budget to plan for 3 to 5 properties, which is what we did an enormous amount of analysis and study on the downtown parking lots. Same goes this year. But we have budget to look at 3 to 5 properties, depending on the size and the scale, at looking at the fit test, the capacity analysis. The marketing piece of it, there's 2 pieces, right? There's creating a brand and an identity around the properties that is universal so that when someone sees a property, they know that it's owned or it's something that you as an EDA are trying to, market, bring forward, et cetera. It creates a brand, right? It's not for an individual property, but it's how do we create a one-pager that looks like if it comes across a broker's table, for example, they're like, this is from the Brainerd EDA. That's what we have and have started. And if you recall from last year, we did a site fit test analysis on the 3 properties and did a 4-page basically spread on the details of each of those properties. That's something that can go directly to a developer or a builder as a marketing piece, if you will, to explain to them the capacity of a site. It's the same thing this year. If we have 3 sites, how do we put that together? Then the messaging, which we talked about very much at the end of last year, was, and then where does it live? Like where can people find this information? Because a huge part of it right now is that people don't know. If people don't know, you can put all the documents together that you want, but if they have no idea that it exists in the first place, you're never going to find them. So actually, my team at the beginning of this year, we put together a website. We shared it with the quarterly consultant meeting. We have it ready to go in terms of how does this get unrolled as EDA properties that you've identified for prioritization, that if you look at the next page and you look at each of the individual, that there's stats about the property, who you would contact, what's the zoning, what's the development capacity, et cetera. So that's this laundry list, if you will. And then the idea is each year, maybe we look at a few properties in more detail.
Got it. Questions? Yes, please, Kelly.
Sorry, I had
No.
round 2, but she stimulated my brain. I think she's dead right. She's right on. I would like to see what we talked about on the parking lots again. A refresher course, not tonight, not to put you on the spot, but sometime in the next EDA meeting or 2, if you could just give us a refresher. Second, I think does your firm do property marketing?
Yes.
Okay. I think that issue should come before the EDA in a regular meeting soon. I think she might be right. I don't think the firm we've hired is either not working for us anymore, or never was. I don't know. But to answer the question, if the parking lots were last year, I like the properties that we own this year. I like the industrial park lots that are left. I like the Wright Street extension, because these are properties that we have money into and we control. And maybe the Roberts property, but I guess I'm thinking we're probably premature on that one. But I would include that in conceptually, because I can't do anything about the Hardee's parking lot today,
Right.
except for to contact them regarding the reconstruction and the possibility of redevelopment of what appears to be underused land. I think that timing is critical to do this year, because I don't think it's like calling up Kevin and saying, hey, what do you think? Because I think you're right. I think there's more involved here. Some of these properties are owned by rental company, like Walmart doesn't own their own
Right.
building, that
Right.
sort of thing. So there's involved there. But I think timing is no time like the present to get rolling on that. But that's where I would start for 2023, and we're already 3 months into it. But if we, and I'll say it's our fault, are not marketing our own stuff well enough, we deserve to sit on it forever. Because that's what's gonna happen. So, anyway, I wanted to answer her question. Where does the EDA? That's my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Bevins. I think yeah, please.
I agree. I agree with what Kelly said, everything that he said. And that's essentially two areas that we would be looking at. So aside from that, how many others are you comfortable marketing or doing analysis on, much like you did downtown? And then I would have said anybody that showed interest in private property that they were willing to redevelop or looking at doing something with, but I didn't know that we hadn't done that yet either. So I would ask staff if we have any properties on this list that you know of the owner wanting to currently develop that property, such as the large chunk of Mills land, Anderson land on the opposite side of town, northeast side of town. Those are the big chunks of property, as well as the Roberts land, but the PUC has asked us to hold back on that one because they're looking for where they want to drill wells. But any of those larger chunks that are going to take time to come up with plans based on topography and wetland management type stuff, I think that's what I would put my focus on, because that's going to be more housing than what we've done so far.
Thank you. Please.
One clarification I would make is we did meet with the Anderson properties. It was about a year ago, though. So things changed. They even have kind of changed the way they have some of their marketing laid out right now. So that's not to say it's not a good idea to follow back up with them, because plans change, especially when it comes to real estate. Mills, at one point, we did try to follow up with them when we knew it was coming online, but now it's actually been sitting there a little bit. I watch the listings very regularly for you up here. It's been sitting, and so people tend to change their mind when they get more vocal if things don't sell right away. So it might be worth reaching back out. But I mean, we have made series of contacts throughout the year to try to stay on top of especially the active listings.
Very good. Anyone else? I've just real quickly here. So whenever I hear the word priority, it always means to me that you're trying to make your dollar go the farthest it can possibly go. You're up against not having the resources to go after everything at once. Just hypothetically, off the top of your head, how much money would it take to attack on all fronts at the same time? And no prioritizing. If you had, what would it take? Would it take double the budget, triple, quadruple, 5 times, 10 times? Just if you had an idea, if you were to guess.
Probably quadruple. It's probably
Quadruple. There you go.
150.
So when I hear that, what makes me think of is, if you want to progress through priority, you attack at the least amount of resistance. You talked about residential could be very, very difficult, right? Because of the gap that exists. Those city-style residential could be very multifamily.
Yes.
Yep. Could be very difficult. So that seems like a high resistance item. My concern is that we would prioritize in a place where we have high resistance, and my leaning would be to lean on the professionals to tell us where the least amount of resistance would be to success, and then prioritize into the weak spots, not the strongholds. So I guess I'm in 100% agreement with what you said, Kelly, and basically where we're talking about with parking lots and so forth. But I would also like to ask you if you think that is strategically the right place to prioritize based upon what you know about the economy, based upon what you know about construction methodology, construction costs, developers, trends, yada, yada, yada. And that's, I guess, where my mind is going is, are the priorities currently aligned with where the least amount of resistance is? Could be a big question, but.
To a certain extent, yes.
Okay.
So my thought is this. I brought the industrial park and the Wright Street extension up because I believe there's a huge opportunity there, especially given what the market has been doing over the last couple of years. I'm in no way suggesting we lose what we did on the downtown parking lots because there's a lot of really good information there. And I'm constantly meeting with folks about multifamily. So it's not as if it's gone into some weird black hole that I don't remember we did it. Everyone I talk to, I'm still talking to them about, could we make this work? So to me, it's more about, we did really good work last year. We're not going to forget it, but let's add something else instead of bringing it much further at this exact moment. We keep the materials. When we get the property listing website up and running, they stay on there. We have the one pager. We consolidate the 4 pages we have. We bring it to a one pager. We keep it on there. We keep it front and center so that folks know that it's available and it's something we're interested in. But instead of taking it to the next step, we reorganize a little bit and kind of look at that Wright Street extension in the industrial park area where I think it's a little bit more low-hanging fruit, where maybe we could make a little bit of money, maybe we could get it out of here, maybe we could get some cool businesses in here, and maybe we could get some new housing. So that's kind of how I see it.
And get something off of our list, thus reducing the priority.
You can take Q off.
Explain.
Is this on the test?
Oh.
Q.
So, okay, guys, so we've been asked here to it is, yes. We've been asked here to revisit our priorities for 2023. Does anyone want to take a stab at any revisions, or are we good with what we've got? We've definitely heard some thoughts here.
Are we looking for a motion, general consensus?
Generally, Mr. Kramvik, can you tell us what, you're obviously looking for some direction on what to focus on here moving forward, correct?
I'm looking for a little bit of consensus because obviously I want you guys to be satisfied with what you get at the end of the year.
Okay, understood. And we're operating on 25% of what we really should be operating on if we were to go attack with all guns, so.
From what I'm hearing is, I think we're all agreeing that the land that we own, and considering the industrial lots that are ready to go, that's the next step, correct? But what aside from that are you willing to do for us this year?
Let me get Mr. Kramvik in here real quick, because he's right up at the edge of his chair and looks, shooting me darts out of his eyes. Go ahead, Mr. Kramvik,
Yeah, so
please.
it does seem like there may be a general consensus with the industrial properties as well as the Wright Street. I think to make a good decision on some of these larger properties, may need to get some more information at a later date. Potentially having Jennifer begin work on the industrial properties would move us forward in the schedule for this year. And then in maybe 2 meetings after we gather more information on interested private property owners, maybe more information on the parkland, we could bring back for another decision on kind of the larger property that could be worked on.
Understood. Thank you, James. It sounds like we're beginning to get a grasp of unifying a vision, unifying a branding, and all that is kind of in the works here. Please, Mr.
I just had a question. I don't remember if we had a motion to send that question to the park board. Is that something on their agenda today to speak about those parks?
No, it's not on the agenda today. We just,
No.
sure.
Agenda?
It's not on today's agenda that I know of. Is it on today's agenda? No, it's not on today's agenda. It'll be on the next one, though.
Oh, you're not going to add it tonight?
No, no.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I was just
We need
wondering.
to give our park board people time to
Yeah.
understand.
Will the park board be using colored dots? Sticky dots?
I can't speak to that.
You're on the chair, or you were.
I'm not in charge of the dots. I run the dots. I'm not in charge. Please, yes.
I have one question. I believe marketing and making sure that the properties are listed so others can see that we have property available. Is there a cost to that, or is that included in our current agreement?
There is a cost to that.
And how much would that cost be?
I can come back to you with, well, first of all, I'd like to
9%.
It's not 9%. I'd like to I would like to make sure that we don't have an errant listing out there that I'm unaware of. That's the first thing, because as brokers, we don't step on each other's toes. And so that's the first piece I would definitely want to look at.
Staff can answer that.
Q? Are you talking about Q?
No, our lots, I think.
Oh.
Your lots, yeah. The second piece of that is to say, some of the work that we're doing obviously crosses over. If we're helping you create a brand and identity and a website, for example, that has the properties listed on it, and then that gets put into the public portal, there are activities that are kind of on both sides of this. So in terms of how much it costs to actually list it, there's costs because I have to put it into the portal. We have to have an agreement. We have to know what a reciprocating broker would actually get paid if they brought a buyer to the table. So there's pieces of that have to get worked out. That's separate from the consulting contract because obviously it also falls under different parts of my insurance in terms of my company and things like that. So, but I'm happy to come back with you with, first of all, answering the question of, is it already listed? But then secondly, what would that look like? How could that program be put together? What would that like sort of unveiling of the marketing, if you will, look like, and what would that cost? I know just from kind of talking around a little bit that there was some, like at one point it was like, we'll sell it for $1 kind of thing or something. And it's like whatever incentives go into it, there are ways on the broker side of it, if you will, to negotiate it where it's not money out of your pocket. Maybe it's the buy side. So the buyer pays the broker fees and pays their broker fees. And so they pay whatever the reduced cost is, plus they're responsible for the broker fees. So there's ways to kind of negotiate this, I think, so that it's not a lot of money out of the pocket of the city, but it's still, we're able to get it out there into the world so people can see it. So, and I'm happy to think creatively about how we might be able to do that.
Great. Please, Mr. O'Day.
Sorry, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on that prospect, but I would like to know what those charges would be. But we just sold last week. We just sold two lots in the industrial park, and was it 3? 2 weeks ago. And I don't think we used a broker, right?
We did not.
So the other plan is, I know it's in Visit Brainerd's plans to help develop a website for a lot of these properties to end up on. So we can always go that route, but I'd still be interested to see how you could speed up that process or be more effective at delivering that before maybe that website is up, or
Or on a larger scale
On a larger scale.
than just our region, right?
yeah.
Please.
So we made a website for properties. I'm just going to tell you that right now, and I can share it with you. I mean, I didn't bring it tonight because I didn't want to confuse the issue. But we as a group have talked so many times about how business gets done on the internet now, right? And so we've got to have like a public place where this stuff gets seen. So we put the framework together for just properties. We didn't put an EDA website together. We put a template website for properties, basically, that we could launch out there that has, and I shared it with the consultants and said, how could we move this forward? Because what I heard from you last year is we want to be able to get this out to the world, but we don't have a tool for that. And making, 8.5 by 11s PDFs isn't going to do that. So how do we make a public place online? So we put the framework together of how that could and we've got it put together. It's certainly something that we shared with everybody because we wanted their feedback and want the feedback of staff and hopefully can move it forward. That, though, doesn't feed into the big brokerage world, if you will, right? It would live on your website. It would live on Bladec, maybe Visit Brainerd. Like, we'd all figure out how that gets unrolled. And again, I just want to emphasize, it's not an EDA website. It is just properties. But it's still a way that we might be able to communicate it online to people.
Thank you. Administrator Bergman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Connie, for doing some research. Just to let you know, we did find out a little bit more about the lots. In November of 2019, the EDA recommended to council that authorizing that we market the lots for $1 an acre for 4 years. So that was made November 2019. Those 4 years at $1 an acre would be up in November of 2023. They are not listed on the MLS, and I believe, doing a little bit of research just kind of on the side, they were listed with Close Converse but taken off, and we did not renew the agreement with Close Converse at the end of 2018.
Thank you. Okay. Well, we're all here to just talk about our priorities and just make sure that we're giving the direction. So does anyone want to take a run? We've already kind of had identified that the industrial and the right properties was on our list. Does anybody else have anything to add or want to give further direction?
I think I've given mine. I don't know if anybody has a different opinion or if they think mine is wrong. I would start there if you don't have anything else.
I agree with that approach, just focusing on the industrial lots that are city-owned.
Got it. And I think everyone's gleaned some perspective on what we're trying to do here. We're going to come back with some further information on cost of list and so forth. So at this point, does staff, Jennifer, you guys feel like you have what you need from us? I'm seeing some heads nodding, so
I do.
Mr. Chair,
please, Mr.
just a reminder, my discussion, that wasn't a motion, included all those red dots starting that notification procedure that 210 is under construction.
Yep.
So many years, and you have apparently opportunity to maybe take advantage of that.
Yes, and it sounds like now, since we have a date.
We have a date, we have conceptual agreement on what we're gonna do, that would be, and I think it's gonna take some time. Plus, sometimes, as a business owner, on this project, it takes, the letter immediately gets set to the side. And it takes a little while to read it and understand that there's somebody trying to help. Okay? You get so much stuff on the interweb and in the mail, and then it becomes overwhelming, and a lot of it gets tossed, so.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I mean, I don't know how many there's obviously a lot of businesses here, but you would think that at least some degree of actual boots on the ground door knocking would maybe play into this, but I could be completely wrong on that.
Well, and that may be where the follow-up comes in.
Very good. Have what we need? We good?
Yes?
Very good. All right, we're going to continue on. We're going to actually be switching back to our old business now. So we're going to go to item 4A. This is a discussion on framework. Mr. Kramvik, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So staff is presenting two documents to the EDA Commission for review. The first document is the quarterly framework guide. Lori, if you want to pull that up. So staff prepared this as part of a request from the consultants. Really, this is laid out by goals and quarters, so goals 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 of the EDA. Also, this included all of the activities and action steps of the EDA from our goal session last fall. And it was really a way to coordinate all of the consultants together because a lot of these goals and activities require collaboration as well as certain things being done by maybe one consultant and then carried over to the next consultant. So that was really I guess the reason for the framework. There was a preliminary one that was discussed at the quarterly consultants meetings, and some recommendations were made, some recommendations were changed. There's two of them that I specifically like to point out here. So after looking at, staff did see that there was a couple missing essentially items for scope of services from what was in the framework, and it really is related to marketing and Visit Brainerd. The first one is creating a comprehensive marketing plan for the EDA. This can be something that's, pretty large, and staff did visit with Visit Brainerd about what this would look like. So currently, this isn't in the scope of services. It's really just assisting with a marketing plan of the EDA. So with that, staff did meet with Visit Brainerd and is potentially looking at doing an amendment to their contract. It would be more related to brand, slogan, and a logo, which would maybe be smaller than a very large comprehensive marketing plan. So I know Mary's here to maybe discuss that part of it as well. And the second part would be public signage. I know from the goals setting that we did in the fall, it was discussed potentially, large signage, potentially billboards. That's really not included in any of the scope of services as well for any of the consultants. This could just be signage for some of the properties that the EDA is looking to market, the Wright Street properties, the downtown parking lots. That's something that staff could certainly work on, is just creating that type of signage. So, kind of looking for maybe a little bit more clarity on what that public signage means from the EDA and if that would also need to be potentially added to the scope of services for Visit Brainerd as well. So before we move on to the next item, maybe have Mary kind of speak about that and see if there's any questions about that part for Visit Brainerd.
Thank you, Mr. Granvik. Would you mind coming up, Mary? Thank you.
As we had discussed in the consultants meeting, there was a lot of conversation around branding and slogan and logo, and that wasn't part of my original scope of services. I had included assisting with a marketing strategy, which is more of a narrative. It would be a document that would say, okay, here's where we should go for the next 3 years, 5 years, taking a look at all of the different pieces of the consultants. And so in our conversation yesterday, the recommendation was just to amend the scope of services and take that assist with the marketing strategy out and replace it with doing a branding contract, if you will. And so what I was intending to do is come back to the EDA with options for logos and slogans that you can certainly choose from at that point, and then we could roll forward on the website, providing assets and materials for like Swanson Haskamp on their one-pagers and get a narrative kind of built around what we're doing here in terms of economic development and working together. So does that cover?
Yeah. Anybody have any questions for Mary or staff?
Do we need a motion to amend the contract?
I think we probably should, Mr. Granvik, or no?
We could just simply bring it, I think we should bring back the full contract on the next meeting, which is our regularly scheduled meeting. You could make a motion, asking staff to do that, or if there's general consensus, we can certainly do that as well.
And also, just for your benefit, I wouldn't be asking for additional money. I talked to a couple of consultants, and I have an estimate, and I think we could certainly do what we need to do within the scope, as long as we're just scope of what I did propose for the $40,000, and just by swapping those two components. So it wouldn't be additional money; it would just be changing the language of the contract.
It's more of a scope alteration. Yeah.
I would be okay with switching that out.
Yeah. Me as well. Anybody else? All right. So
Thank you.
go ahead. Thank you, Mary.
Maybe do a motion just to make sure that everybody's okay with that, and then I can
Okay.
bring the contract back at the next meeting.
Does anyone object to just swapping out the, or make a motion, one or the other?
Mr. Chair, I'll move to direct staff to bring back the contract for Visit Brainerd with the aforementioned changes.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second? And we got a second by Mr. O'Day. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, and motion carries. There we go. Thank you, Mary and staff.
So the next part to that was the public signage and getting some clarity from the EDA Commission on what that looks like.
All right. You want to just basically lead us through what, so if I, go ahead, James, just.
Yeah, so I do remember from the goal setting that the EDA worked on last fall that public signage was included in as part of the goals for marketing. It was brought up during that conversation. Is there potential signs that are, a large sign that's put on a building, maybe somewhere downtown or on 210, or if there's something put on a billboard to market the EDA. So public signage was included in there, but you're looking for more direction if that's something that the EDA would like to move towards to have some type of large marketing sign. Again, that would probably have to be added to the scope of services to Visit Brainerd, because at this time, it's not in any of the contracts. If it's simply creating public signage to market properties like the parking lots downtown, Wright Street properties, to put some EDA signage out there to market it, that's something that staff could work on with a signage company to create that. So, you know, if the EDA is interested in billboards, you'd probably have, you know, Visit Brainerd come back with some ideas for that and what costs may be to give options for the EDA. Otherwise, staff can just work on signage for properties.
Very good, thank you. Any comments here, guys? Questions?
I just have one
Please.
comment. With today's world, like, I like signage, don't get me wrong, but digital signage, I think, is more important to get on the web so people actually can see it. Not everyone drives by a certain street every day, but they will surf the internet and things will populate.
I see high-tech banners at every single one of your sites.
I know, I love them too, but we have a lot of them. But if a lot of our properties are kind of clustered, then you're limiting that area versus a wide umbrella. If we had properties like everywhere, then people would see the signage everywhere. But if we have our properties kind of are clustered, if you don't drive by one of those clusters, you might not see it as much as if you were on the internet. It's just my opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else? Please.
So in terms of public signage, does that include like permanent signs, like wayfinding signs to find downtown or other parks and stuff? I just can't remember if that was part of the discussion. I think I brought up public signage just in relation to the 210 work, and is there any way we can piggyback on that? My biggest beef is that there's just absolutely no signage to direct you to downtown, so if that can be part of the 210 expansion, great, but I don't know how that process starts or who we talk to get that rolling, but.
Very good. Anybody else? I'll just jump in here. I certainly appreciate the internet world, but I can also say that I've bought a couple properties just because I happened to see the sign and like, boom, something triggered in my mind. I saw it and I was like, oh, what could I do there? And boom, ended up, moving down a path just because I saw that it was for sale. So my feeling is that especially, every single real estate company in the world has signs, says this is for sale, for that exact reason, I'm assuming. So my leaning is I do feel like the signage is a direction to go, especially if they're the types of signs that have our logo on them. They soak in that branding on parcel after parcel, and you see that it is this entity that is selling these. And then also if they can be reused over and over and over again. Also a really common thing with realtor companies now, or real estate companies, is on that sign you have a sticker with a QR code. You click it, boom, it brings you to that listing or brings you back to that homepage, kind of combining those of us that are visually oriented with those of us who are internet surfer and phone surfers. But so that's just my 2 cents. Is I do see value in advertising, both maybe on a large billboard scale where we would just identify what it is, who we are, and what we do, as well as this is for sale, this is for sale, this is for sale, this is for sale, and this is how you find it. So that's my 2 cents.
I agree, and I think with the downtown parking lots especially, you're going to get a lot of foot traffic, driving traffic, whatever. People are going to see that. Nobody knows that those are available right now, except for us. We should tell people.
That's a good marketing plan.
It is.
Any direction you're looking for here, Mr. Kramvik?
Yes, it does seem like there's some consensus to create signage for some of those marketing of the EDA properties. So I think that's something that staff would begin preparing as part of our quarterly work for ideas for that. I think, maybe making some type of motion if you'd like Visit Brainerd to come back with any large scale, ideas. I guess I'd be looking for that if that is something that the EDA is interested in.
Sure.
There's certain, there is a potentially available funds still left from what we were potentially funding for the year. Was it roughly $10,000? So there could be options there as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kramvik. Well, it sounds like we have general consensus that some version of signing is good, but this really feels like a second step to after we get all of our branding and our website and all of that going. So I think we can pass on to staff. We have kind of a general consensus that something may be in the works, but now it seems a little premature until we get all of this branding kind of sorted out and in front of us. So maybe a second step here. So unless anybody has any objections, we'll move on from that. Good. All right. Let's see here. What do we got? Deed, item 4B, discussions on deed.
I guess the second document of the previous one, which would be the metric page. So,
Oh, sure.
Yep. So with this, the second page here kind of helps describe what the EDA does specifically for the public to understand. So the framework was arranged by goals. This one's kind of more of actions or what the EDA does. So staff kind of took a look at this based on what the EDA had recommended from the last meeting. So organize it in business retention, business attraction, development, redevelopment, and marketing. And then within the green area, that's kind of the key activities and programs that the EDA does. It's not every one of the activities that are in the I guess the goals that were set there, but maybe some of the key activities. And then the bottom one indicates the metrics that were included with that. And that's really, I think, that part of the things that I know Marie brought up from the last one. How do we measure some of the goals and successes of the EDA? So with that. Just kind of wanted to go over each one of those to explain kind of what went into the metrics there. So the first one, under business retention, percentage of BRE businesses continuing to operate. When we talk to Bladek about this, businesses don't really give their names in this, and obviously Bladek knows what they are, but they a lot of times remain anonymous, but we should be able to get a percentage of the businesses that are continuing to operate based on the BRE interviews that we're doing. The second one is number of what current businesses are making use of River to Rails. And then another one is one of the goals of the EDA is for staff to potentially come up with new incentive programs, whether it's incentive programs or looking for more grants as well. So I think that would be also part of it. I know another big goal of the EDA is to increase childcare availability. Some of the DEED Main Street grants went to some of those childcare facilities. So I think with this, obviously, we'd have to get a baseline number of how many childcare spots are open or how many childcare availability spots are open in commercial childcare facilities, getting that number, and then kind of tracking that throughout the year. Obviously, anything that the EDA has helped to create additional childcare facilities would increase that number for the city and would be able to be essentially used as a metric. The next one for business attraction, decrease in the number of vacant commercial buildings and storefronts. I know something that Swanson Hascamp, as well as the city, will be working on this year. We'll be going around taking a look at where we have our vacant storefronts in all of the city, and then working with those property owners to potentially market those on the EDA website. So that's something that we'd be able to create a metric on as well. Number of new businesses using incentive programs. So, any new businesses that are a result of the DEED Main Street program or River to Rails, also putting that into a report. Next one, redevelopment and development, increasing development of city-owned properties and vacant underutilized properties. That's a big one that we just went through here. The next one is increased housing, which is also related to the work that Swanson Hascamp's doing. And kind of noted with these, some of these I think could be looked at and analyzed this year. Some of them, we're still creating a list of some of these vacant properties this year, working to get them on the website. So it may not, for this season, it may not have a complete metric to it, but certainly the following year. And part of creating this document here is to have this ready for the next year. And then the last one within marketing, increasing retail sales. This one may be difficult to create a metric on. I know I do want to talk to the DDBC about this. They included it in part of the thing that they would like to measure as part of their goals. So it's maybe information would be able to get from the DDBC, but certainly the EDA does spend money on marketing ad campaigns, and this may be a way to put some type of metric to that money that's spent on those ad campaigns. So do need to get some more information to see if that's a metric that we can get essentially to look at. The last one is, I guess, two more, increase information for marketable properties, and that's really creating those web pages on on the EDA website for vacant properties, letting you know what the zoning districts are, letting you know what the size is, use is. So right now, obviously, we don't have that right now, so we want to increase information for marketable properties, and then create reports for discussion with developers. So those are really the metrics that staff looked at for each of these, and certainly would like the EDA to weigh on these as well.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Kramvik. Any thoughts? Everyone look this over?
I like this.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think it's still relevant.
Kevin?
Please, yes.
Yeah, I like this too, but I just noticed from the previous 2 pages and this page all combined, I didn't see the James Street Trailer Park mentioned anywhere. And last year we identified that redevelopment as a goal unanimously as a body that we want to move forward on that. But I'm not seeing that that's in the works for the next couple of years.
That one was in the framework.
That was in the framework?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it.
Yep, nope, that one was in the framework.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, you looking for,
I want to hear the vote on how some board thought that was a good idea.
can probably be
Anyway,
found.
fine.
Can probably be found.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. My apologies.
What do you need? Consensus, direction?
That's
Oh,
another
sorry.
Feedback.
Sorry.
Yeah, and thank you so much. This looks great. I think it's a great tool for helping recruit, hopefully, some more commissioners to come on to the board. So one piece I kind of see missing, and I don't know if it needs to be like on a public-facing summary of all of our kind of focus areas, but like having our organizational goals. So setting for ourselves a goal of filling the vacant board seats. I don't know, I know it came up in our strategic planning discussion that we had in 2021? That we were hoping to move in the direction of hiring like a EDA director. So I don't know if we want to have more discussion around that, if what steps need to happen to get to that point, but just having those kind of goals stated and on the record so that we can check in on them, I think would be helpful. And yeah, I guess what I was really looking for, and we have our framework, there's the Excel document version of it, and I think this is a little bit more digestible. But I'm trying to move in the direction of having some more measurable metrics so that we can see where we're at one point in time and then measure it again at a later point and see what direction we're moving and look at what initiatives we've put in place that might have adjusted those numbers just to help us tell what is being successful. So to whatever extent we can, I'm not saying we need to have like all these metrics. I know that's a lot of work goes into figuring out what the metrics are and how to actually measure that consistently. But if we can just have baseline things like number of housing units, number of childcare providers, number of, vacant properties at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year, if we can track, developer inquiries and whether we have follow-throughs on those and what sales come out of that. So just those sorts of numbers. So at the end of the year, we can have some sort of annual report that is, at least stating what the numbers are and what direction we're moving, just so, again, we're being more strategic in how we're tracking progress on things. I know this is a framework we're kind of working with. I kind of quibble with the way the terminology of the goals, because I see those more as like strategies to support larger goals, but I don't want to spend too much time just on semantics on things, but because I really do see we have like these overarching goals that fall in these silos of, we want to retain our businesses, we want to attract new businesses, we want to support development and redevelopment, we want to have marketing efforts that support economic development. So those are kind of like our broad goals, and I really see like the way the goals are labeled, those are more just like strategies to help us achieve those overarching goals. So I can ignore that they're called goals and just put a placeholder in and call them strategies in my head if it's too much to like reword that, but just trying to move us in the direction of knowing that like goals are something that are action oriented, they're on a timeline, that they're measurable, and trying to just keep that in mind when we're setting goals so that we, again, can continue to track metrics and track progress on those things. So, but yeah, thank you for putting this together. I think, again, like this, I just was trying to reach out to people to gauge interest on coming and joining the EDA, and it was a struggle for me to just summarize what we're doing. So I think this is like a great step. So thank you.
Anybody else? Very good. You need action on this, James?
I guess if there was anything anybody wanted to add or take off of it, we could do that at this time, and I could bring it back for the next meeting. But if it looks good, should be good.
Something specific you're looking for?
I guess, again, I don't know that it needs to be on like a public document or something that we'd be sharing more broadly, but just setting, an organizational goal of, filling the vacant board positions. And I don't know how to frame a goal around getting us to a point where we have an EDA director, or if that's just a larger discussion we need to have. But just to keep that on the radar, so moving towards that target.
Okay. All right. Anything else? All right. On to our deed, correct? There we go. Mr. Kramvik, please. You going to set this one up for us here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Community Development Department and Bladeck have provided updates on the Deed Main Street grant recipients. Bladeck's update reflects the dispersal of funds, while the Community Development Department's update reflects the building permits and inspections. Each of them were color-coded to essentially show what progress has been made on them. Kind of before I turn this over to Bladeck, I do want to note that 2 businesses have officially declined funding in the amount of $54,187. It's staff's recommendation to hold a subcommittee meeting the week of March 20th to March 24th to recommend reallocation of those funds, and then do a little bit more research. Tyler may, I believe, reach out to other businesses to see if they are able to use their funds. So before the next subcommittee meeting, to get a little bit more information on that. And then staff would also prepare a document of projects that have been permitted, but those businesses were not awarded funds, to give the EDA subcommittee additional information on that as well. So staff would be looking to recommend a subcommittee meeting, so then those funds could be recommended for reallocation at the next EDA meeting. And then I'll turn it over to Tyler.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kramvik. Hi, Tyler.
Good evening. It is evening now, isn't it, Kelly?
It is.
Mr. Bevins?
We're doing our best. We're doing our best.
The documents, the updates for the Main Street grant were provided to you in your packet, so I'm sure most of you have gone through this, and there's not many other updates that I need to get provide with it. Just that 19 of these projects have gone through the process now of gone to deed for financing for them. So that's 19 out of 33. That's pretty good to this point. There's been some challenges with a few of them, just with this leverage form, and the leverage form was causing some confusion for folks. And I don't know if this leverage form was a form that came from deed that was asking the property owners for them to truly make an assumption as to what the increase in their value would be in the next 3 to 5 years. So it was really a challenging form. If you know the state organizations, obviously this is something that doesn't surprise anybody. But what we did is worked with the Initiative Foundation with a few of these organizations to say, you can really just say we're going to increase by our property value. Maybe we'll increase 3% or 5%. It's just an arbitrary number. So, but people were getting tripped up on it, and we didn't know that until the Initiative Foundation came back to us and said people aren't returning these. And so we started reaching out and finding out why they weren't returning them. The form was confusing. So we've addressed that. There is still a couple of folks, the Legion was one of them, that obviously, as you guys know, we approved a flagpole for that. So I don't think the increase in property value is really going to go up. So we told them to put 0. And so they've completed that. They've got that back to the Initiative Foundation now. So that one will be moving forward. A couple of the others are just waiting on bids. We meet probably every other week with the Initiative Foundation just so we can get updates on what's going on, so we can update you guys with this. But, with this list right now, I feel good about the list. I feel good about a couple of those that we didn't know were going to probably push forward, that are pushing forward. So that's very positive. It addresses, one of them certainly addresses the childcare component that we have in this community. So happy about that. Dave Perringer, we've gotten to know him very well. He's been in our office about once a week in the last couple of months, so we've been doing pretty well with getting his projects moving forward and getting those completed. So the list is what it is today. We'll get an update hopefully before the subcommittee meets again, based on staff recommendations that week of March 20th. You know, we do have some funds that are still sitting out there. And, you know, we've gotten a couple of requests, a couple of groups have contacted us to say, hey, we didn't know this was going on. I'm like, well, this was 6 months ago. So, but I don't think anything's new is going to come to the surface. Up to you guys as far as your discretion is concerned to how you want to reallocate those funds. But again, I know that Gabe and I have talked about this numerous times, that November timeline is coming. So, you know, we do have a November 1st timeline where these projects have to be at least through this process by November 1st. Otherwise, they are no longer eligible for their funding. And then from that point, you have 36 months to get your project completed. So with that, happy to take any questions, but we continue, obviously, all the questions still continue to come through us. We funneled through IF. IF works with DEED, so it's cumbersome, but it's working to this point. So happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I think I'll defer to all of you to set a meeting date for the subcommittee and come back to revisit that $54-ish thousand that's still out there.
Very good, thank you. Did anyone have any questions for Tyler? Or staff? Yeah, please.
Yeah, just on the 805 Laurel, that's a big one. I mean, does it look like they're moving forward and that is going to have a shovel in the ground this fall?
I'm going to refer to staff on that. I'm not sure. I know that Eric and Jennifer have been the primary folks with that one. IF hasn't messed with that because it's going through these guys at this point. That's what Don has indicated to us.
Yeah. Eric?
Yeah, so all indications from what I'm hearing from the developers that they're still moving forward. They are trying to get their, dollars and cents put onto their pro forma at this point before they're able to apply for additional funding. As far as getting a shovel in the ground by October, that is going to be a concern, and I did chat with them about that 2 weeks ago. So as city staff and the HRA are trying to brainstorm on how we can keep that one moving so these dollars don't have to go back, I would say stay tuned. They have every intention of moving forward with the project. Timing is difficult with a project that size. I don't know if DEED has any flexibility in that either. And so that's something that we may need to chat with IF to channel through with DEED as well. When we're talking October to maybe beginning of 2024, the dollars need to be allocated by 2024 and spent by 2026. If that is still something that DEED is willing to allow within those timelines, I believe 100% that project will go forward. I don't know if 2023 in the fall is going to be the break ground, though.
One of my primary concerns would be is that if the timeline isn't met, and it isn't met, does IF lose the funding?
That's what, do we reallocate it? We need to know by X date, and it's not November 1st. We got to know before then. Yeah. And then another one, so it sounded like you were going to reach out to some of these white or yellow ones between now and when the subcommittee does meet, so we have more answers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was it's between us and IF, and I had a couple of them, Don had a couple of them, so we're working through the ones that have been slow to respond.
Okay.
Very good. Any other questions? Jennifer, please. Nope? Nope. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm assuming at the next meeting, we'll be discussing kind of that deadline working backwards and when we would have to reallocate working backwards from time frame, assuming, right? Very good. All right. Staff reports. Who wants to go first?
Mr. Chair, I'll be very brief. Just want to let you know that we did successfully close with VCV on February 28th. We have been paid, and they officially own the 2 industrial park lots. James and I met yesterday with representatives from VCV to move forward on their actual development. That will go before, potentially could go before Planning Commission, but I think we're set and ready to go.
Very good, thank you.
That's all I got.
Thank you. Finance Director Connie Hillman. CD Director James.
Nothing to add.
All right, Eric.
Just real briefly, we continue to field inquiries for development within the city walls of Brainerd, which is great. John and I sat down with a interested landowner yesterday. He and his kids that have a couple of different parcels within the city of Brainerd. I'll be sitting down with city staff to see what we could put out in those different parcels. But it continues to be very encouraging that we have people, and as Jennifer has mentioned, she's having discussions a lot. I think Tyler is having a lot of discussions. These are all good signs. Timing-wise, we're trying to push those as quickly as possible, but really good to see people having interest in saying, we want to help with housing, and we think we can put housing on our property. What can we do? So having them ask the city on the front end of it will hopefully alleviate the headaches on the back end of it.
Good. Thank you, Eric. Mr. Johnson, anything to add?
Yeah, I didn't attend the quarterly consultants report as the liaison to this body. My invitation was lost in the mail, but I'm confident I'll be invited to the next one.
Very good. Thank you. Ms. Beezer?
No comment.
Ms. Kirsch?
Nothing here.
Mr. Bevins?
Yeah, every week I get a email from Visit Brainerd of what's going on in the area, and I've gone to a lot of the stuff. I'm really grateful for that. I wish Mary was still here, but because I don't get out much, and they let me know what's going on. So I like that. I signed up for it, and it's been really helpful, even if I don't go, just to see that there's stuff happening in March in Brainerd. And so thank Visit Brainerd for that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bevins. Mr. O'Day?
Yeah, I did attend strategic planning with the school district. There were some board members there and some community members, and just brainstorming with them. They're always looking to. We think of job placement from this room. I think we've spoken about it, mainly focusing on CLC students. They're interested in learning what we can help with, and I brought up BladeX knowledge with a lot of the interviews that you've done. So I encourage them to reach out to the EDA. They've also shown some interest in possibly getting rid of some property that they own that they may not use. But it was good to get the conversation going because we don't typically communicate as much as people might think between the city and the school district. So hopefully we can continue that trend.
Did you ask for trees on Oak Street?
Not yet.
Thank you, Mr. O'Day. All right, that'll end our agenda here. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Pose same sign. Very good. Thank you, everyone.